5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hello and welcome to Nappi Time, a podcast about life and learning. You can also check me out on Instagram at Christina Nappi Mindfulness or at my website at mrsnappy.my.canva.site/mindfulness. On today's show, we have guest Ms. Ashley Kortenhaus from Monmouth Regional High School, where she is a mental health counselor. She also has a practice called Crean Counseling outside of the school, which is open to anyone. Today we'll be talking about self-care, emotions, and mental health. And my conversations with Ashley are some of my favorite. So I hope you enjoy it and get as much out of it as I did. Enjoy.
So I'm.
Get off your phone.
Ooh, call that. So like I said, so I'm Mrs. Kortenhaus. Like my full name, I'm Ashley Kortenhaus. So I don't mind if people call me Miss Ashley or Miss Kortenhaus. I always say as long as you talk to me respectfully, I don't care. So I've been working at Monmouth. This is my 4th year. So actually I started, if you're a senior, I started your freshman year, if you were here.
It's your first class.
For many of you, this is like my first class. This is great. So, I'm the mental health counselor. My office is by the media center, bright blue mailbox on my office door. It's like right when you go through the breezeway. My office is the first one there. So I've been here for 4 years. I used to work at an alternative school before I came here, and I worked at the alternative school for 4 years. It was also high school setting, and fairly local-ish, probably like 20 minutes from here. And so I did that, and I am also a licensed professional counselor in the state of New Jersey. So what that means is like I'm a licensed therapist. So outside of school, like this is my main job. This is my full-time job that I'm here all the time. But I also have my own, I own my own private practice outside of school. So I do have clients through my private practice that I see. And then
When you graduate, if you don't want to leave her.
Yes. So
still accessible.
I accept clients. I don't accept insurance. So it is self-pay, which kind of sucks, but it is what it is. And then I also do intensive in-community therapy. So basically I go to people's houses and provide therapy as well, mostly for like at-risk youth, people who are like really struggling or in a crisis setting. So that's kind of what I do. I work with people for a lot of different reasons. I am a trauma specialist, so I tend to get most clients who have extensive trauma, whatever that might look like for a particular person. But I do work with just general like anxiety, depression. I have clients with eating disorders, a lot of domestic violence, and either current or, in the past. The list goes on and on and on. I've worked with people in the foster care system as well, kids who have been, going through the adoption process. So there's a lot of different reasons why I might meet with someone, but those are just some of them.
Cool. So we already have some good questions here, but I'm going to start with this. I'm going to start with the one that I had asked last class after you rattled off all of the things that you do, not just here at your full-time job, which was, how do you manage to fit in any time for Ashley, any time for self-care?
Yeah, it's the most important thing that I have to do. I hear a lot every single day for the last, almost 8 years that I've been practicing. So I hear some tough stuff every day. So self-care is really important. I do go to a yoga gym. So I try to get to do yoga every week to kind of decompress, have a little bit of me time. But I also have a dog. Her name is Leia, and she's a coonhound, and I love her so much. And so I do a lot of hiking and walking with her and just spending time and cuddling with her. A lot of self-care like that. I spend time with my friends, go out to dinner, things like that, random things, getting massages or facials and getting my nails done. Little things. I don't necessarily do all of those things every single week, but I try to make time, because I think making time for your self-care is really important.
Yeah. You mentioned cuddling with your dog, and I'm glad that you mentioned that, because I think a lot of times when people initially think of self-care, they kind of have this preconceived notion that it's about smoothies and workouts and like all of that kind of like exterior stuff, or that it has to be something big that you do for yourself
Or that you pay for.
Right. And I've also just laid with my cat for like 5 or 10 minutes, and it's so relaxing. So like if you even have an animal, like that's an element of self-care.
And so fun fact with that, so when I worked at my other school, I actually did equine therapy. So I brought my students
Horses.
to a barn, and they did horseback riding, and we just kind of spent time with the horses. And, you know, sometimes I would have a therapy session with one of my students while we were at the barn and they were petting a horse and things like that. So the thing with like horses and animals, like whether it's a dog or a cat, so it actually releases, especially with horses, but it releases oxytocin in the brain. So they release oxytocin for us that we kind of absorb, and oxytocin is one of the chemicals. It's like a happy hormone in your brain.
When you hug somebody, especially if you hug them like close to their heart, you get that good hug.
Yeah.
You're releasing oxytocin to each other.
Yeah. Yep. So that's fun fact with animals.
Yeah.
Releases oxytocin, makes you happy.
Hang out with the animals, get your hugs in.
Yep.
Hugs actually, I don't know if you ever think about this, but and maybe you more so, but hugs are something I almost forget to get in sometimes, like with my kids or with my husband. And when Mr. Nappi and I are super busy and we're going through the day like passing each other and we don't hug, there's no emotional connection in her day. We're just two people existing in the same space. Yeah. And if that goes for too long, then we start to like not even really be nice to each other or pay attention to each other. So one of the things that we both try to do is get in like a good hug, if nothing else. Like if we can't do anything else together, all right, let's get a hug.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I do that to my husband randomly sometimes, where it's like if I'm working, right? So it's like I go from here and then I go to a client, right? Or I have several clients after, work or something, and we're just two ships passing. I'll do that, where it's like, can I just have a hug?
Yeah, get a good one in.
Like,
take
just
for the
hug
road.
For like, it's not like for like 5 minutes, but it's like, like a good like 15 seconds of hugging.
It's not it's a close hug. Yeah. So as we go through these questions, I'm obviously not a professional, so she will answer from the professional as well as personal point of view. I will share any experience that I have as well to answer any of the questions that come up. And I think, where do I want to start? There's so many good choices. All right. I'm going to actually start with this one because... This one?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, because I also want to speak to that one.
Uh-huh.
So I'm going to intro, and then I'm going to hand it on to you.
Yep.
Okay, so here's the statement / question. I was always told that I'm too young to be depressed, or I have nothing to stress about. Does depression or anxiety have an age? This is a great question. I would say no, regardless of my professional opinion, but in my experience, absolutely not. When I was 13 is when I was diagnosed with depression, and it was very severe. And in my head, I couldn't really identify what it was that was making me depressed, because it is a chemical imbalance for me. But I was also going through a lot of turmoil at that time. My mom was coming out as gay. My parents were getting divorced. There was a lot of fighting in the house. So obviously there was other stuff going on, but I wasn't like conscious of it to be able to tell anybody, well, part of my depression is due to the struggle I'm going through. So in regards to you having nothing to stress about, everybody has something to stress about. Like we all, like stress is a part of our lives. So one, I'm sorry that you were told that.
Yeah.
What do you think?
So, there's so many different ways that I could answer this, and that I will kind of answer it. The first thing is when we talk about having a depressive disorder versus being depressed, right? And kind of experiencing the feeling of depression. Just like having anxiety versus having an anxiety disorder. Number one, no, there's like no just like age where it's like...
Oh yeah, also my kids have anxiety.
Yeah, it's not like you have just one age where it's like, okay, you can't get diagnosed with anything until you're 18. Like, it doesn't work like that. I have like a 7-year-old that I've been working with for a long time who has an anxiety disorder, right?
My daughter, we identified it at 3.
Yeah, so no matter what age, these emotions can present no matter what age you are. That's the first thing. When it does come to talking about a diagnosable disorder, like a mental illness, according to the DSM, which is the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, that therapists and doctors and everybody uses to kind of like diagnose people, right? Give a medical diagnosis. Number one, I cannot medically diagnose someone. I'm not an MD. I don't have my doctorate in psychology or psychiatry or anything like that. Now, I do still diagnose as part of my job. I have to bill insurance. So I give my diagnostic impression. Typically, I like to pat myself on the back. I do a fairly decent job with diagnosing, but so that's one thing. And there are certain disorders that actually you can't be given this diagnosis until a certain age because of the brain still developing.
Is that like schizophrenia is one of them, or no?
Schizophrenia is one of them. There's a few. There's quite a few where they will not, like, you just can't be diagnosed with it until a certain age. And actually even different things with, like, autism and ADHD and just different diagnoses, you'll actually see if you read the DSM that when you go in, it says that it has to be present after, like it can be present before the age of like 6. I'm just bringing that up for an example. But it also has to continue to be a problem after 6 years old, right? Because if I'm just talking to a 1-year-old or a 2-year-old that doesn't have any vocabulary and they're not talking, right? I can't just be like, well, you have a speech disorder, you have this, right? Because they're not old enough for you to determine that.
Right.
But yeah, so when it comes back to that question, in terms of you like, oh, you're not allowed to have any issues because you're just in high school, right? Like, what do you have to stress about? I hear that all the time. It's just not simply true. Anxiety is an emotion. Depression is an emotion that everyone feels, right? So yeah, you're never just like too young or too old to experience any of these emotions, especially like when you experience just different things in your life, whether it's childhood trauma or just dysfunction in the home, domestic violence, like when you experience these different things.
Stop reading my mind. I was going to ask you about ACEs.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
So I was going to ask her to kind of follow up on that. If she could talk a little bit about what ACEs are, because it's something that I wanted to address with them. Because once I learned about ACEs, I was like, that makes so much sense why I am where I am in life.
Yeah, so ACEs, I'm not an expert on ACEs, but what it stands for is Adverse Childhood Experiences. So throughout your childhood, what it basically talks about is if a child experiences certain things over time, right, especially under a certain age, the likelihood that it will affect their mental health and also their physical health, like puts you at a higher risk for heart disease, or for different things like that too. So different like adverse childhood experiences or ACEs might be observing domestic violence in the home, right? Or there being any sort of like abuse throughout your childhood. And they basically kind of put it in terms of like numbers and like categories where it's like, but what it really comes down to is the more ACEs you're exposed to as a child, the higher likelihood that you will experience, it's kind of like risk factors, right? So like the higher the likelihood that you might experience these different like physical ailments or, like mental health disorders.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is kind of why I wanted you to bring it up, because again, kind of going back to the fact that there isn't an age to experience these things, especially because children who go through these adverse experiences experience that as a result of their adverse experiences.
Absolutely.
All right. So I'm going to go with all of their questions first, since there's a nice amount, and then I'll just kind of jump in. What's up, Coop? You can. All right, so let's just cover the basic one first.
Okay.
Obviously, stress is the thing, as we all talked about. So what are some ways that we can deal with that stress?
Yes.
So many ways. So she's not going to cover it all.
I was about to say, I'm definitely not going to cover everything because there's not just one way that you can manage stress. I say the biggest thing for anyone with any sort of mental health issue that you're having or any like adverse life experience or just challenge that you're facing, number one is we really have to start practicing some self-awareness. I always encourage people to check in with yourself and see what is going on, what is stressing you out. Because if we just kind of like keep putting a Band-Aid on things, like I always say, like when people are stressed and then they just vape, or they're leaning on drinking, or like self-harming, or like any of these different things that people might do to try to cope, especially those things that I listed that are kind of like negative ways to cope, right? That could be hurting you more. It's a Band-Aid, right? It's just trying to kind of like vaguely fix the problem, like, okay, just like go take a deep breath, but we're not getting to the bottom of why you are getting so stressed out. And where this is affecting you so much. So self-awareness is really key for you to check in with how you're feeling, check in with what's going on around you. What are your thoughts? I say to kind of look at 3 categories when it comes to self-awareness, and checking in with yourself. The first thing is looking at your physiological symptoms. So the physical symptoms that you are having and experiencing in your body. Stress can manifest very physical. Does that happen for you guys? Do you guys ever have like physical manifestations of stress? So that could be heart palpitations, shaking, bouncing like your leg, not just because of like energy, but because of anxiety, right? It could be getting like body aches, or like your stomach is starting to get queasy, getting really like hot flashes. Does anyone experience any of those things when you get stressed? Yeah, so we say a few hands. Yeah, so there's that physiological. Check in with yourself. Do a head-to-toe scan kind of through your body, a body scan, and see what is going on, right? Look at your thoughts. That's another thing. This is the one thing that people most often overlook. Yes, is because it's hard. It's hard to pay attention to our internal dialogue because, number one, it's just natural. Most people do just generally have a dialogue going on in your head all day long, whether it's thinking about what that person texted you or what this person said, just generally going through maybe a to-do list of the day, whatever it is, daydreaming, right? We all kind of have that internal dialogue. But when we're stressed or when we're struggling with anxiety or something like that, those negative feelings, that negative self-talk is very prevalent, and we need to pay attention to that, right? And then the other thing is your behaviors. So we're putting up the cognitive triangle right now, thought, behavior, and feelings, right? So then we also have to pay attention to our behaviors. How am I behaving? Am I crying? Am I pacing back and forth, right? Am I stimming? Am I yelling at people or having a short temper?
That's me.
Right? Am I doing all these different things? So paying attention to these different things, not just, oh, this is how I feel, right? But our feelings come together with so many other things, right? So paying attention to those 3 categories when you're analyzing your stress. And then really when it comes to, okay, back to the question in terms of how do I cope with that stress, it's different for everybody, right? Maybe you have to talk to somebody, right? For some people, they come down and talk to me, or they talk to Miss Jarrows or their guidance counselor, they talk to a teacher, right? For other people, they might need to do a physical coping skill, right? Yoga, deep breathing, using your 5 senses, right? So using your sense of smell, smelling some essential oils. I just did that with a student earlier today, where I have some like roller essential oils and like different things, right? And like just bottles of essential oil. So they just rolled a little bit on their wrist, so that way if they got stressed throughout the day, they can kind of like go ahead and smell it, right? Kind of calm down. And paying attention to those 5 senses, sucking on a mint or something like that. Yes?
Oh, I was going to ask you.
Oh, okay.
And I was going to the essential oil that Kayla, who visited us on Monday, made for me so that you can smell it. Just to get an idea.
I love blends, yes.
Just to get an idea of what Ms. Kortenhaus is talking about.
Yeah.
Oh, and it is a roller.
Yeah,
Feel
there you
free
go.
to
See?
roll it on you.
I haven't smelled it yet, so.
Yeah.
So there's an example.
Yep, that's
you
an
can
example.
roll it on your hands. Some people might not like the smell. In that case, don't roll it on yourself.
Right. And that's the thing too, is that sometimes certain senses, like for me, I actually get overstimulated when I focus on certain senses. So the things that I pay attention to most are probably touch and smell. So if I focus on sight, I get way too overstimulated. I get way more stressed out because of like all the other things that I can see. So sometimes I'll even close my eyes and focus on a scent, right? Like I'll smell an essential oil or like my tea or something like that, right? Or think about what you guys, a lot of you, I've even seen you doing it naturally, where you might play with your hair, play with like a necklace, right? Or like I even did it earlier and I didn't realize it, playing with like a button, right? Like I have buttons on my dress, so it's like I'm playing with a button, right? It's just kind of fidgeting. So paying attention to the feeling or the shape of something can actually be very calming when you're feeling overstimulated, when you're feeling stressed out, or like distressed in any way.
Cool. I want to talk to a few of the points that she made. So I'm going to go with the talking to someone first, because obviously that like seems like such a simple thing, but I'm just going to share my experience of last week. So last week, we were super busy. I had to edit all of these essays for Mr. Nappi. He just brought me back a folder for the second set of revisions that I have to do. And I have a presentation that I have to give this weekend at a retreat that he's doing. So basically all of his State Teacher of the Year things are also giving me a lot of work. So I was really, really stressed out. I was feeling really overwhelmed. I was like, I don't know how we're going to function as individuals in a family going through all of this. And I had fortunately gone to yoga therapy, which is like a personalized yoga class for whatever it is that's going on with you. It's just you and the instructor. I was supposed to go to therapy afterwards, but because so much was going on in my head, I never emailed her back to tell her I was coming. So she had another patient. So I missed regular therapy. I had yoga therapy. I knew I had to talk to my husband about everything that was going on. And as I was like venting, he's like, what can I do? Do you want me to cancel the workshop? Do you want me to do this? Do you want me to do that? Because that's what guys do. Guys like to problem solve. And most of the time women just are like, I need to get it out, right? So I got it out, I cried, and he was all worried about me. And the next day I was like, okay, let's go. And I was so much better just because I got out whatever was in my head that I was worried about. And then I had a good cry.
Okay.
And then I felt complete. So talking, it's more than we think sometimes.
Yeah.
I also want to go back to the physical symptoms. One of the reasons I think it's really important to pay attention to those physical symptoms is because what's happening is your nervous system is getting activated, and that's why those things are coming up, right? You're having a stomach ache because you're stressed out, which means your nervous system is activated. And if we don't pay attention to those body signals that we get, our body's going to stay in that elevated stress state, which is what leads to chronic illness. And I am like a huge testament to that because I've always pushed my whole life, and kind of took a long time to figure out how to take care of myself. And so, genetics or whatever, I have a chronic illness. So, from that standpoint, like listen to your body so that you can respond to your body's needs, because it's really important. As you get older, you'll notice.
Well, the physical and the emotional are so much connected too, right? So a lot of people think that like mental health is so separate, but it's really not. I mean, your mental and your physical health is impacted. Think of what I said about oxytocin before. It's a physical chemical in your body, right? That also regulates just different functions, like bodily functions that you have, right? But it's also linked to your moods, right? So you have to pay attention to your body, and oftentimes it goes hand in hand too. So there are physical things that you can do to help improve your mental health. So one of the hardest things when people have depression, and some people do get really mad at me when I kind of tell them this, but one big thing to help you overcome depression is to push past that intense lack of motivation and desire to do anything. And it's physically so hard to just get up and do the daily tasks that you need to do. But when you force yourself to do some of those physical things over time, it actually does help you come out of that depression, like that depressive state, and feel better. So there's definitely a huge connection there.
And I think movement is a great way to kind of get that little high that you're looking for when you're depressed. So it doesn't have to be like a cardio workout. It could be like a walk in the sunshine, right? But we have to move emotions through our body, otherwise they stay stuck in there. So any kind of sport, athletics, all that stuff is really great for your mental health.
Yeah.
I want to go back to these questions because they're good. I was diagnosed with depression at a young age, and now I see kids romanticize the idea of being depressed when they don't fully understand what it can really be like and are quick to judge others who actually have it. How do you deal with people like that?
So this is one of the hardest parts of my job, and I'm going to be completely honest with you, TikTok has helped and ruined so much of the mental health field. It's not even funny, because people often see people who are talking about their mental health on TikTok and they start to self-diagnose themselves with things that they don't actually have. Because here's the thing, when you're looking at the DSM, right, for me as a professional, I could sit here and diagnose myself with like 80 different disorders, right? Because there are very similar symptoms that exist with so many of these different things, right? So a lot of people might look and say, oh, well, I've actually had this at my old school. I'm schizophrenic. I have schizophrenia because I'm experiencing some of these conditions. They didn't, right? There was some dissociating going on. There was different things that was happening, but they didn't have that disorder, right? So it's really hard, and I do unfortunately see some people glamorizing having these different disorders or just diagnosing themselves with these different things. And in terms of how I deal with people like this, it's very different than probably you will deal with people like this. In my field, I have to have very real conversations, and I have to talk about why that person feels like they have this disorder. Why is it important for someone to feel like they have a depressive disorder, right? Instead of maybe just struggling with some depressed feelings, right? Because again, that's very different to experience depression in terms of a feeling versus having a depressive disorder, right? Very different here. So I have those types of conversations on the regular. For you guys, though, I think boundary setting is going to be very important for you. So if you're noticing that people are maybe glamorizing it or, sitting here and kind of, right, what was the romanticizing, right, the idea of having depression when it is a very real struggle, I think it's okay for you to be able to set boundaries with people in terms of how they're talking about it. I'm very firm in terms of I love advocating. I love that people can be open about their mental health. I myself am very open about my own mental health challenges and my own diagnoses, but the reality is, like, what does that romanticizing look like? And do you have to then set boundaries maybe with those people that are around you? Block them on social media if you can't handle looking at those posts, or you feel that they're inappropriate. You can report them on social media for an inappropriate post if you feel like it's more harmful than helpful. So I think boundaries is going to be a really big thing for that, and continuing to advocate in a more appropriate way.
Yeah. I think when I think about the fact that you're being judged or you're being told what depression is and what depression isn't, that's really invalidating. That's going to make you feel like you're wrong, right? And you are the best person to know your experience. So if that were me in that situation, I really wouldn't give that person my time. Like, if they weren't willing to listen to me, I'm going to have to just walk away and shut them out, because I know for me that that's not the case. I don't need to worry about their depression and whether or not they have it. I just need to take care of myself.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too, I just want to address really quick with that question too, is that everyone's mental health looks different. I could have 10 people in front of me with a diagnosed, like, generalized anxiety disorder, right? Or a panic disorder. It looks completely different for everyone. It manifests very differently. Depression, right? Having major depressive disorder looks very different for every single person. So that's something to keep in mind too, is that, not everyone is going to fully understand exactly what your mental health looks like, because it is very personal to you. But I think going back, definitely setting the boundaries is going to be important.
I have a good one that I'm going to save for the other side, because we're probably going to talk a lot on that one. But I want to grab this one before we move towards a break. Have you seen how bipolar disorder, I'm guessing BPD, bipolar disorder?
No. BPD is borderline personality disorder.
Oh, I'm on the wrong way.
Okay. So how have you seen borderline personality disorder affect people? What are tips for coping with BPD and the symptoms? So first, borderline personality disorder is a personality disorder that often manifests when people have attachment issues. So when there's, like, very deep-rooted attachment issues with, like, parents, typically that's where it kind of manifests from a young age. You have this ongoing attachment issue where, like, maybe you're not getting the close attachments to a parent that you might need, then it could kind of develop into BPD. There's other ways too. Again, I'm not an expert on all of these different disorders, just from my own personal experience. I have worked a lot with people with BPD, and it is hard. It's definitely hard. The number one thing to work with if you have a friend or a loved one with BPD is setting boundaries. It is crucial that they understand boundaries in relationships. So I have one person that I worked with.
Can we take time out?
Yes.
Because I was actually going to ask you about
Yeah.
that. We haven't covered boundaries yet.
I love boundaries.
So perhaps you could briefly explain that
Yes.
before we
talk
about it more.
I'll talk about what boundaries are. So boundaries are crucial. I love talking about boundaries. I love setting boundaries. Boundaries are huge. They're very important. So
We will practice that in
yes.
here.
So 6 main types of boundaries that I like to talk about. First one's very obvious. You talk about it in like kindergarten. Physical boundaries, right? Respecting people's bubble, right? I'm not going to go up. I'm not sitting here with Miss Nappi like, oh,
She
right?
kinda like
but like, I'm
But
not
right.
going to do that, right? I'm going to respect just a physical, professional,
Right.
physical
It
boundary,
would be
right?
weird
That we
if we were
have.
talking like this.
Where it's like we're just canoodling
Yeah.
over here, right? It's like a little weird, right? In a professional setting. But yeah, so physical boundaries, right? Physical proximity to people. Sexual boundaries are another pretty, I like to hope that it's an obvious one. But sexual boundaries in terms of obviously sexual acts, but also sexual innuendos and jokes talking about sex. So it's not just the physical act around sex or sexual acts, but even jokes about sex and all of that, right? That falls within that sexual boundary. You have emotional boundaries, respecting how someone is feeling and honoring that. So if people are coming up to you being like, you don't feel that way. You don't deserve to feel stressed. Like, it's fine. You're in high school, right? That's minimizing, right? Invalidating someone's feelings. That's an example of breaking someone's emotional boundary. Intellectual boundaries pretty much covers all like intellectual ideas, opinions, beliefs that someone has. You have material boundaries. So I'm not coming up and just taking your stuff, right? I'm not going to go up and take a drink of your water. That's weird maybe, right? But also it's breaking that material boundary, right? And a physical boundary there.
I like to think with material boundaries of how Mr. Nappi and Tony never put back the stuff they borrow from me.
Yes, perfect example. Yep. So if you borrow something, giving it back, don't just take someone's stuff, right? And then yes, you also respect that person's stuff. So I'm not coming up and taking her water bottle and chucking it and denting it and then giving it back, right? Like, I'm going to return it how I found it, right? Or how you lent it to me. And then time boundaries, I find most often, it's one of the hardest boundaries for teenagers with each other. And it's been forever. It's not a generational thing. It was like that when I was a teenager too. But feeling like people have to respond to your snap right away or they hate me. They need to be on FaceTime with me all day long. You need to call me like right away, right? Like, it's having time boundaries is making time for yourself, having time for friends, having time for family, right? All of these different areas of your life, you make time for that, right? So boundaries are crucial. Boundaries are important in every single relationship, not just intimate relationships, so not just with a dating partner, but also with your family members, also with your friends, also with colleagues, right? Every single relationship that you are in has boundaries. A lot of them are unspoken, right? But one thing that people often don't do is speak and advocate for their boundaries, and that is crucial. It's extremely important. And so when I actually step in and start talking with students about boundaries, it's often because of dating partners. And that's typically where we start opening up the conversation. But for a lot of people, they start looking at their boundaries with their friends and realizing that things are off and that they might need to set some boundaries with friends. Or they look at a dating or a family relationship and they're like, oh, my parents are like really breaking these emotional boundaries. Like, they're invalidating me all the time, right? We might need to work on that. So, and then going back to BPD with borderline, so like I've had several clients. One I actually just closed out with. She was a 7-year-old who I still think a little too young to be given a BPD diagnosis, but I can unfortunately see it trending in that direction because of past experiences that she's had with her parents. And what it comes down to is I had to work a lot on boundaries because as a 7-year-old, you might think, okay, they might get attached to someone, right, and come up and ask for a hug. I'm used to clients like needing a hug at the end of a session, or like, especially the little ones who like come up and it's like, Miss Ashley, you know, and they give me a hug, and like, that's fine. But she had no physical boundaries at all, and would climb all over people and would touch people inappropriately. And it was like I had to set very firm boundaries with her in terms of, in relationships, this is a physical boundary, this is a sexual boundary, this is an emotional boundary, because she had literally none. And it often does come down to, again, those attachment issues at a very young age. So when you're looking at BPD, right, so what are the tips for coping with it, and the symptoms, I mean, I can't list every single one. I didn't memorize the DSM. I can't list every single one. Like I said, I do notice, like, with the attachments and that. But coping with the symptoms, coping with BPD and the symptoms of BPD, really comes down to trying to learn more, a lot of education. So learning more about boundaries and learning about healthy relationships. But also, I do sometimes see a lot of people with BPD that experience self-harming. And so being able to develop coping skills to be able to deal with the self-harming too, to be able to prevent that. And again, establishing kind of those connections with people, like a therapist or something like that, so that way you can let these feelings out, because they can be very intense. But yeah, also.
Cool. So. All right, let's take a break, because they're going to go to lunch in a little bit.
Okay.
I feel like I forgot to tell you that.
Yep, that's okay. What time's lunch? 11:30 something?
Yeah. Fair. All right, so we have 2 more questions that were sent in that we want to address before anything else. So we're going to start with, we'll start with the more personal one, and then we'll go to the next one. So since I was little, I was forced to grow up fast. I was 7, taking care of my 3-year-old sister while both my parents were going to work. There was a lack of communication since then until now, and it affected me to open up. Are there any ways, by the way, I love this question, the fact that you're asking.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Thank you for asking.
Yeah. Are there any ways I can slowly open up more frequently?
Yes. So I'm just going to talk about how I understand this question, because that's how I'm going to answer it. So it sounds like, you know, there's been such a lack of communication because your parents were so busy, but now I'm understanding it to be like, okay, like they're trying to communicate a little bit more. That's the way I'm kind of understanding it, but it's making it awkward for you. Like, it's still awkward and difficult to maybe open up, right, about how you're feeling.
And I'm also thinking that maybe that translates to how they have relationships with other people.
Absolutely. So it absolutely can be the case too. And I don't know if this person, if you have felt that way, but I just want to validate that can absolutely happen. So in terms of ways that you can open up more frequently, I think part of it too comes down to a little bit of doing some exposure therapy. And exposure therapy is basically like you're trying to kind of force yourself to do things slowly, right? Yeah. So you kind of start small and you build up from there. So when it comes to opening up about people, if you haven't done that your entire life, that's going to be very hard for you to just randomly start doing more. So what I would say is maybe pick a couple of people, right? And open up about maybe not super intense topics first. So just get in the habit of kind of letting people into your life. So if it is, say, with your parents, right, maybe you start talking to them just about like menial things, like kind of like things
what
that
happened today.
Yeah, like what did you do today? Instead of, if they say, oh, how was school? Instead of just saying, oh, it's fine, right? Maybe you can walk through your classes, like, oh, English was fun, mindfulness was relaxing, you know, but history or math was really complicated. It was like boring.
My 12-year-old likes to tell me about the drama.
Yes, you can talk about the drama. Like talking about things that maybe aren't as personal, right? But still getting in the habit of letting someone into your life, right? Because it's a lot easier to let someone in on a surface level, right? And then slowly build from there. Yeah. So then you can slowly, as you start feeling more comfortable just opening up to them about random little things, right? Then over time, you can build to some of like the deeper things, right? That if you're maybe feeling more upset one day, right? Then we can kind of slowly work on opening up, you know, like that.
And then it'll be more comfortable for you to come to that person because you already have established a connection with them, even on that surface level. They're used to you talking to them.
Yeah, and that's good to do even with friends. Like I hear that sometimes where people feel like the quote-unquote therapist of their friend group, right? Where they're just so used to everyone coming to them, but they don't open up about their own problems, right? And that's where I would encourage you too. It can be awkward. It can definitely be uncomfortable opening up about yourself, right, to other people, but being able to kind of slowly get there, right? We build. So I would definitely say a little bit of exposure therapy is good with that sort of situation.
And I think it's amazing that you have that insight that that's what's affecting your communication.
Right. Yeah, that self-awareness is huge.
Exactly.
To know that, like, this is maybe where it's coming from, too. The fact that, like, your whole life you haven't really had that much communication with people, at least maybe not with your parents, right? So to know that that's where it's kind of coming from, and to also be open to opening up, right? That it's not like you're just completely shut off and it's like, I don't want to work on this at all. But to know, okay, this is something that I do want to maybe grow and build. That's awesome.
That is awesome.
Kudos.
Cool. Have any of the stories that you've heard or the meetings you've had with your clients changed your outlook or perspective on life?
I love that
That's a great
question,
question.
and that question is always, like, the answer to that question is always yes. I learn so much from my students and my clients every single day. So, and what's great too about my job is, you know, every single person, no matter if you're a therapist, listen, I'm a therapist, I don't have my entire life together all the time. I like to think I'm pretty stable, right? And I've done a lot of work in my life, but like, it's, you know, things happen. So I notice too, like, when I'm working with my clients, I'm refreshing my own skills too. I'm refreshing my memory on the different techniques that I need to use in my own life. But there are specific stories that I will never forget. Even from before I graduated college, when I was just interning in a school, I vividly remember one young person, and they're much older now. I remember her name and everything, first and last name. I will never forget it, and she was the first person that really fully opened up to me, and it was about her childhood abuse. And I was able to help her through that, and I was able to help get an abusive person out of her life for good. And it was one of those moments where it's like, you know, I don't do it as much anymore, but I was definitely in my car crying after that day, you know, because it definitely hit really hard. But also in a good way, you know what I mean? So that's where that self-care definitely has to come into play, because I hear stories every single day, and some of them are, I would say most of them are very easy to tolerate and to handle and to listen to, with no real, like, reaction, right? But I'm not heartless, you know? I definitely connect with my clients and my students, and there's times where if someone's sharing something and we're getting emotional, you know, we're getting emotional together, you know? But yeah, so definitely, I take the things that people tell me, you know, throughout my whole life and with my work with other clients, and absolutely.
And I would say the same with teaching. Like the fact that I've met so many different kinds of young people,
Yes.
Has given me the perspective that we all think so differently, and we all have so many different talents, and this is not the end all be all, right? So yeah. I think any time that you work with other people, you're going to have the opportunity to have your perspectives challenged, and open up a little bit.
Cool. So I think another one popped up here. I love this.
What's up? Yeah, you can. I feel like occasionally when I get mad or frustrated, when I open up about it to other people, people always make some excuse that I'm supposedly in the wrong. How can I deal with this?
Two ways with that. Number one, set boundaries. If you're communicating with people, or you're getting mad at people or whatever, or, you know, you're just feeling your feelings, you are allowed to feel mad, and you are allowed to feel frustrated. 100%, those feelings are completely valid for whatever reason you are getting mad or frustrated. But definitely setting boundaries with people. That if you are constantly having friends that are invalidating your feelings, that is them breaking your emotional boundaries. So I would really maybe have a talk with your friends about emotional boundaries, and how, you know, when I get mad or frustrated, like, I need to be able to let this out. Right? And I need to be able to kind of talk to people, or be able to feel this way without feeling like I'm in the wrong and I'm doing something wrong, right? Because you're allowed to be angry. Absolutely. Right? But the other thing I'm going to talk about with that one. So number one, definitely, if people are constantly just invalidating you and putting you down for the, like, being angry and saying you can't feel this way, set some boundaries, because, you know, those are not necessarily very good friends that you want to keep in your life. But number two is this. I'm going to go back to the self-awareness that we talked about in the beginning of class, because no one is perfect. We all make mistakes. And there are times, I'm speaking for myself, right? I don't know if you can relate to me, but there are times when I am mad or frustrated or stressed out or overwhelmed that I do lash out at people. That I have to take responsibility for. My feelings are completely valid. I'm allowed to be angry. I'm allowed to be upset, but I have to check myself in terms of how I'm expressing that to someone else. So it's not okay, like, if I'm mad at my husband, because it happens, for me to just be like, oh, you
can't even say the
like,
things that you want to
I was
say.
like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
I say a lot of things. So, like, right, I have to catch myself. And if I'm angry, I can tell him that I'm angry, right, and that I'm frustrated. Or if I am just sitting there, like, I'm angry about something else, but I'm talking about it, if he just sits there, and because he does this sometimes, tells me to just calm down, right? Like, just calm down. Like, this person didn't mean it that way,
Don't
right?
ever tell an aggravated person to calm down.
No,
literally the worst
works.
thing. I did that once to my mom.
Yeah, it's not helpful. So, so like, if you're mad or you're angry about something, like, maybe going to that person that you feel like you can let it out. They're not going to judge you, right? They're going to let you kind of get your feelings out and not necessarily make an excuse. Mm-hmm. And I would encourage you guys, as any friends who are listening to another friend who's angry, right? If I have a friend come to me, or a client or student or whatever come to me and they're angry, right? I'm going to let them let that out, right? Obviously, in my job, if we're going to problem solve, it's a little different working with a student or a client versus like one of my friends. But say my friend even comes to me and they're venting and they're just so pissed off, I'm going to listen. That's the first thing. And the second thing, too, is I'm not just going to sit and make excuses, tell them that they're always in the wrong, right? If I do feel like they were maybe in the wrong, I might say, like, okay, like, is there anything that you maybe could do differently? Mm-hmm. Or like that maybe you did do wrong in that sort of situation? But also it's kind of like, well, what do you need from me?
Right.
In this moment, you're really angry. Like, how can I support you?
So kind of to go with that, one of the things that I do, because I have a man who wants to solve all my problems in my life, which is lovely, right?
But very annoying sometimes, right?
Yeah. Yes.
It's great but awful.
It's great but awful, yeah. So I will literally say, I do not need advice. I just need to tell you what's going on and vent. Yeah. And that way, he just listens and doesn't try to fix anything or tell me where I'm wrong. Because, like, I might know that I did something wrong, mm-hmm. and I don't need someone else to tell me that. I just need to get out whatever I need to get out.
Right.
So preempting that conversation.
Yeah. Tell them what you need ahead of time,
mm-hmm.
right? Or even after that, right? Like, what do you need from your friend? Do you need to just vent and get it out,
mm-hmm.
right? And then again, if it is always coming back to they're just, like, constantly invalidating you still and just being like, well, just, like, calm down. It's really not that big a deal. Then again, set some boundaries with that person because they are breaking your emotional boundaries with that situation.
Cool.
Yeah.
I want to go to this one, and because it might be our last question, unless another one pops up. Is there any message you'd like high school age kids to know? Maybe even a breathing strategy or an affirmation. So whether it's like a message that you have or a practice you think maybe they can take with them.
I have so many messages.
I know.
All the things. No. So the biggest thing that is the hardest thing to believe is that it does get better. It's so cliche. People hear it all the time, right? I heard it all the time growing up too, and I was like, ugh, but it sucks now, right? And I'm not saying that to invalidate your struggle, because I do genuinely feel like if you guys are struggling, please reach out to me, your guidance counselor, Miss Jarrows, like somebody to get the support to help and like work through these things. Don't feel like you have to do it all by yourself. But knowing too and kind of giving yourself that reminder that, it does get better, right? And things will, like, especially as you get older, like adulthood, it can be stressful. It's not perfect, right? It comes with its own stressors and everything, but it is fun. It can be fun. And when you set those boundaries with people, you're going to be able, after high school, to choose who you keep in your life.
Mm-hmm. You're not in the same building with everybody over and over again.
It's the best feeling. It really is, because then you're going to really be able to surround yourself by the people who you want to be surrounded by.
People who lift you up.
So it does definitely, get better. It can definitely get better. I'm a firm believer in that. Mm-hmm. And again, I don't say that to invalidate and say that, like, you're not going to encounter any challenges, because life is 100% a roller coaster, and you will encounter other challenges throughout your life, 100%. I've been there. I'm 30 years old, and I'm It's okay. I still encounter challenges, right? Yep. But generally, do I think now is better than high school?
Older than you. I'm a lot older.
I'm young.
You are.
I'm a young one. But yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you on
That's
that.
okay. No, it's fine. Yeah.
Another thing to kind of add on to that is if you are struggling and you're here in this building, there are so many people here that you don't know that want to support you. So if you're having, whether it's just like a moment that you're going through or you're having a particularly difficult experience, check in with, if not, Ms. Kortenhaus or Ms. Jarvis, even just your guidance counselors. Let them know what's going on, and they will give you some strategies. They might even offer to email your teachers to let them know that something's going on. They'll never tell us what it is, but they'll email us just so like, hey, so-and-so's going through a thing. Can you just, maybe pay a little extra attention to them? Maybe they need some leniency with some due dates, right? So it's there's always people out there to help you. So use those people.
Yeah. No, it's so true. I know, like, when I think back to my high school experience, I was definitely going through it when I was your age, and there was a lot going on in my home life, and I never went to my guidance counselor. Not about that. In hell. No, there was no chance. We had horrible guidance counselors.
Mine knew my family
when I was in high school. Oh, so see, that makes it hard too.
Yeah.
When they know your family. I don't think I would know any of your family, because I'm not from New Jersey. So fun fact. But yeah, so it's like I definitely understand being hesitant or resistant to go and talk to someone because I never did it myself. Mm-hmm. And it's funny now that like I'm in this position and I never did it when I was your age. But I get it. I understand why people don't.
So let's do this real quick before we do end, and I'll ask if anybody else has any questions. If someone did want to come talk to you, like what can they expect from that first visit so that maybe they're not as anxious to come to you because they know what to expect?
Yeah, so every visit is different because every person's different, right? And I take a very individualized approach. So, what I do with one person might not be what I do with another person, right? So it is very different. First thing is just I want to talk about really briefly how to get in touch with me. So the best way to get in contact with me to schedule a session is email. It's probably the best way because I do always have my email up on my computer and I am constantly checking it throughout the day. And I have a good organization system with that. So I see the email and I can put it directly into my email calendar. So that's probably the best way. But I also have yellow slips on my door that you can fill out and drop in my lockbox, on the blue lockbox that's on my office door. I'm the only person in the whole building with a key to that lockbox.
And it's right here.
And it's here. It's either on my person or I locked my keys in my office. So either way, no one else is going to get to it. So that's another way. And then the pink passes from guidance, my name is on there, so you can always fill out one of those pink passes and give it to Miss Ciencio in the guidance office. She's right at the desk, or really any of the counselors, and they'll get it to me. Or again, you can even take that pink pass and put it in my lockbox. That's totally fine. So I would say, I used to say more that you could just drop by my office. That still stands. I don't want to feel like I just don't have an open door policy. If I have no one in my office, feel free to pop by. However, that is hard because I do meet with a lot of students, and like this week, for example, I'm fully booked unless someone's absent or someone doesn't show up for their session. So it's definitely going to be important to kind of like check in. I do know, though, sometimes things just pop up throughout your day. You're having a rough moment. You just, whatever, you just need someone to talk to. In those sort of situations, I would always just say ask to go to guidance or to CST or something like that, because then if I am with someone, they'll be able to assess and kind of help you. Okay, or get me if needed. So in terms of when you do come to me, what a first session looks like. And honestly, I can even speak to like if you decide to do therapy outside of school and kind of what that looks like as well. Really, the first few sessions are building rapport. So yes, I do, especially in school because it is brief. Like it's not like I have some clients outside of school that I've been working with. I have one that I've been working with for like 7 years. So it's like very different. We can take it a lot slower. In school, obviously, I want to help problem solve. I want to help alleviate some of the challenges that you're having. And we have a short period of time to do that. So I do kind of get right into it sometimes where if you come to my office, I'm like, obviously, of course, asking you how you're doing, right? Just checking in with you. But also asking you, so why did you feel like you needed to meet with someone, right? And we can talk about what's kind of been going on. And I have had students who come down and they're like, I don't know, I just wanted to see what it would be like, right? And it's like, okay. And then my role is to kind of assess to see how things are going too. So we check in with each other about, all right, how's school going? How's the family, right? How's the family life and the living situation? I like to learn more about you. How are your friendships and relationships with other people? And then also just kind of getting you to practice some of that self-awareness and to talk about, your feelings. Like, what have you been feeling lately? Any challenging emotions popping up? Any really positive things happening too? So it really depends person to person. And then moving forward too, the sessions definitely look a little bit different as well, because when we've already kind of established and we've talked to each other about what the challenges are, I really am a big believer in giving goals. So, each time we meet, I want to give you a goal to work on when you leave my office, right? So it's like, whether that's gaining self-awareness over the next week, right? And using a feeling wheel or something like that. I gave that goal for someone today. Or it's like evaluating cognitive distortions, which you guys will talk about in here actually at some point. So cognitive distortions are like negative thought patterns that people get into. So it could be evaluating that and just kind of, practicing that, practicing coping skills, practicing self-care, whatever it is. It's an individualized goal for each person and what they're, currently experiencing and dealing with.
Sounds good. Any other last minute questions before that bell rings? All right, I didn't think so, but I wanted to ask.
If any questions do pop up, obviously I'm just here today, but if you guys have any questions about just mental health generally too, you can always email me. Or ask Ms. Nappi and she can email me or whatever.
Either one.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for your undivided attention. I know.
Thank you guys.
I mean, I don't actually know. I don't know. Is it as hard for you to sit this long as it is for me? Is it just a me thing?
Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Ms. Kortenhaus. And if you have any questions for her and you're a Monmouth Regional student, go ahead and email her. She will get back to you and answer those questions. So before we go, I just want to thank our guest and thank you for sitting as long as you might have to listen to this podcast. Thanks. Have a great day.